Welcome to the Roar the Lions UK podcast. My name's Matthew Turner. I'm here with my co-hosts Anthony Fitzpatrick and Steve Collins, now joined by Dave Birkett of the Detroit Free Press, at Dave Birkett on Twitter. How you doing, Dave?
What's up, fellas? How are you?
Very well. Thank you.
All good.
Thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate your time. Why don't you just, I'm sure everyone who's listening to this knows who you are, but just give us a quick introduction.
Oh, wow. I've been covering the Lions for, a decade now, I guess. 2010 was my first season at the Free Press. And what is this, 4 coaches now? So, before that, covered a little bit everything, high schools, colleges. And so I've seen a lot of bad football in my time, as I think a lot of Lions fans can attest. But, hey, who knows, man? Maybe this new regime has a turnaround in it.
So just in terms of your accolades as well, just before we get started, it's on your Twitter profile as well, but it's quite amazing. A 3-time Michigan Sports Writer of the Year, you're a Hall of Fame voter, the Associated Press sports editors voted you the top 10 beat writers a few years ago. It's quite amazing considering how many guys are on the beat all across America. So that must be quite a thing for you generally, just to be recognized by your peers.
Oh, I appreciate that. Yeah, it's nice. I like to tell people I think my mom's the one who voted on the Michigan Sports Writer of the Year, so I probably had an in on a couple of those. But those are just I guess it's probably a reward to all the people I work with too.
Absolutely. So let's get started by talking about you, and then we'll probably move on to a little bit about the Lions later, and then a couple of questions from our listeners. If that's like, hopefully we have the time for all of that. If we can't, we'll cut some things. But first of all, you got your degree at Michigan State University. I don't actually know what that was for, but what was it, journalism? And was it always a kind of career path that you wanted to have to cover football in general?
Not football in general. I think I like to tell people it was probably, I think I have a good sense of self. And there was probably somewhere early in my high school years where I realized I wasn't going to make the NBA. And so it was sort of like figure out a way that you don't have to work for a living, do something related to sports. And that's how I stumbled into this. I guess I went to school for journalism. I always thought, in the back of my head, I remember reading the Free Press when I was a young kid, reading the Pistons scores or, game stories and kind of rewriting my own story on it. Isaiah Thomas scored 25 points, whatever I saw. And so that's kind of my start. Worked out in Virginia for a year after I graduated, worked here locally, the suburban chain of papers, the Oakland Press after that, AnnArbor.com, which is essentially I'm live, and covered Michigan. And like I said, been at the Free Press here for better part of a decade now.
And you've covered both University of Michigan and MSU as well as the Lions. What's the kind of nuances in terms of like making that leap from covering college to the pros?
It's funny. I can remember being back in college and being like, oh, man, this is the dream job, right? A little bit of basketball, a little bit of football. You kind of do a little bit of everything. And it probably wasn't until I started covering the NFL full time where I was like, no, this is it, because you're dealing with, men, I guess. That's really the biggest difference, right? Guys that, hey, if they want to talk to you, there are rules, right? People are supposed to be available. But I guess, outside of the locker room, right? If they want to talk to you, if they want to do something, they do it. And there's not as much hand-holding as there is in college. I really got, frustrated by some of the, what the sports information directors, how they could make people available or not make them available at their own whim. And so I'm fortunate now to be working in a professional locker room with a lot of professionals. And I found it to be a great, change of pace here covering the league.
When it comes to your analysis of the Lions or sort of players in general, how much of it is done by the eye test, obviously from you, and how much do sort of newer metrics like PFF, next gen stats, how do they factor in?
I would say, I certainly use, the next gen stats and some of those, and they can certainly help. I think they supplement what you see in a lot of ways, or maybe not even what you see, but what you hear too. I like to say, especially when it comes to the draft, right? Like these scouts that the NFL teams pay good money to, they do this for a living. And I can watch football and I can watch film, and I'm still not going to see what a lot of these guys see. So I like to rely on them. The eye test definitely plays a part. and then I use some of those other metrics to help sort of support that, right? Maybe you don't realize how Jared Goff, for instance, right? How short his passes were last year until you see the numbers stacked up against all the other quarterbacks. And so some of that really helps out because you know, there's only one team that I cover and one team that I follow that closely. Even though I watch other football, I don't quite know as much about some of these other teams unless I'm relying on some of those numbers or some of the other people that I talk to.
So what's a typical week like for you in the season in terms of maybe the access you get from the Lions, the time you spend researching, writing stories, that sort of thing? Because when you're on the beat, you know, the press conferences they have, I imagine it can be quite grueling. And then obviously because it's print media, you've got to actually write the pieces too. I imagine it's quite intense.
Yeah, I mean, you know, it's definitely changed too. I mean, the focus on the internet, obviously we had produced a lot more content for a while. I think now maybe the trend is, you know, quality over quantity, and not that you ever wanted to, you know, to forego quality, but I think, you know, there's maybe some more merit, especially when you go to a subscriber base and you know, presenting deeper features. But, you know, typically Monday is press conference day. So down in Allen Park, you know, you talk to the coach, you get a little bit of locker room after their meetings. Tuesday is typically the NFL off day. Wednesday, Thursday, Friday are practices. So out at practice every day, open locker room. It used to be open locker room every day. No open locker room last year, obviously. Saturday's a travel day or my day to kick it with fam. And, you know, Sunday is the game. And so there's a lot of writing that goes on. You know, a lot of it is, you know, analysis. There's a lot of reporting that you have to do, whether it's in the locker room or outside, you know, making phone calls. So certainly, you know, I take this time of year, I'm off for about a month, right? I just get away and don't do anything because when training camp starts up at the end of July, I basically go till January.
Oof.
Steve, you're up.
And in terms of covering the Lions, Dave, what's been like the kind of standout moment for you where like a moment that you've like just enjoyed being there, like as you know, as a fan, but also as you know, part of covering the franchise? Has there been like one moment, whether it's on the field or in the locker room, that just like really stands out for you?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I don't have a lot of those moments because I really, you know, I still get this question, right? How can you sort of divorce yourself, right? The fan side, because I grew up here, you know, from the, you know, the news, you know, reporter side. And I remember going to a game with some buddies, you know, had season tickets. This was, I don't know, 15, 20 years ago almost. You know, I was there with my friends. I think this was probably one of the first years at Ford Field. And I remember one of my buddies, you know, he's standing up cheering at whatever was going on in the game. And he, you know, I'm sitting down in my seat next to him. And he smacks me on the arm. He's like, "What are you doing? You know, you're not cheering." And it's one of those things where I was sort of watching the game like a reporter, even though I was in the stands with them, you know, watching who's going on and off the field and what sort of offense and defense they're playing. And so I don't know that there's been any, you know, surreal moments of like, wow, this is cool. You know, doing Kelvin Johnson's Hall of Fame presentation this year, that was a unique thing to do. That was the first time I've had to, you know, present a Hall of Fame candidate. You know, covering my first Super Bowl, I guess, was pretty unique because, you know, having never been to a Super Bowl, but honestly, that week is a ton of work. So I could probably do without Super Bowls too.
I guess sort of expanding on that a little bit then, obviously we just asked about maybe the best moment with the Lions, but obviously you've been a journalist for some time now. Is there a piece of work throughout your sort of whole career that you're most proud of, either whether it was due to the subject matter or someone you were interviewing, or there was, you know, a particular bit of it that just really stands out for you?
Yeah, that's a good question too. I mean, I think there's a lot of them that you look back on and that your, you know, unique stories or your ability to tell the story that, you know, I thought were, you know, I liked the job I did, or, you know, I got really good feedback from readers on, you know, when Tim Shaw, I think a lot of people, you know, in Michigan at least remember Tim Shaw, great high school star here, played for the Titans, had ALS. He let me come and spend a day with him. And, you know, he took me with him to go see his attorney when he did his living will, you know, and that was just a real personal and private thing. Yeah, I climbed Mount Kilimanjaro with John L. Smith, the former Michigan State coach. You know, that's an idea that came about 15 years ago. And that was just a crazy, unique experience that I never would have had if not for the job. So I think there's a lot of stories along the way that are similar to that, you know, that you enjoy doing, you know, and then it's on to the next one, I guess.
You've already mentioned that you're a Hall of Fame voter, or at least if we didn't mention it, obviously you presented Calvin as you just said. When someone's like got it in their profile, they're a Hall of Fame voter, I think a casual fan sees that and goes, oh, okay, that means they're legit. But that's kind of where it stops in terms of understanding what that means. So in terms of, say, the voting process, does it take a lot of consideration on your part to try and work out who you're going to elect? Who's the biggest name in recent years that you think's been snubbed or that was worthy but didn't get in? Give us an idea of what that's all like.
No, that's a good question, because there is a lot of, I think people don't quite understand the process, right? We elect 5 modern era players pretty much every year. And some people think, well, you just vote for 5. It's not it. There's 48 voters. You know, we spend a little bit of the off season. It's not like every day, but, you know, you talk to people, you ask about the class that's coming up, who you might vote on. So you get plenty of feedback. You vote for, you know, they'll send a big list out in the early fall, you know, 125 guys, and everybody votes for 25. The top 25 vote getters, you know, then that is the second ballot. That reduction is down to 15. And when you have your 15, that's the group of finalists that you vote on. And then when you go into the selection process itself, every single one of those 15 players is presented to the committee, all 48, you know, members, to discuss. And that's where you know, from the people that you've talked to throughout the year, the information that you gathered on their Hall of Fame candidacy versus other people's, that's where that is presented and sort of sorted out. And so it's reduced from first the 15, everyone votes on 10. And then it's the top 10 vote getter. So I could have my top 5 and maybe a guy doesn't even make the top 10. Terrell Owens, for instance, he would be the one, when you talk about a snub, that was the guy that I thought should have gone in first ballot. He obviously didn't. You know, there's a faction of the room that just didn't support his candidacy. I would have voted him among my top 5 players. I didn't get the chance because I don't think he made the cut to 10 even that first year. So then you vote from that 10 down to 5. And then of the final 5, you just vote yes or no.
I wanted to ask about the Detroit Free Press. So the Detroit Free Press, for a Lions fan in the UK, it's kind of like your gateway drug into the world of like Detroit sports media. And your relationship with like Carlos, because like, you know, you're like a classic buddy cop movie, you know. I always maybe like, or The Odd Couple, or maybe like 48 Hours with yeah, you're like the kind of positive Eddie Murphy guy. He's the Nick Nolte, world weary, seen it all, you know, kind of grouchy guy. Do you think that your kind of relationship and your viewpoints and how you kind of come across when you do your kind of like podcasts, does that kind of like accurately reflect the sort of polarization that you get in the fan base, or is it just something that just comes naturally?
I think that's just us. And, you know, I'll tell you what, because I think that's, you know, it's probably I think I would like to think people think I'm fair about things, and, you know, maybe Carlos takes the extreme views. I mean, that's sort of the feedback that I've gotten, but it's funny. You know, I did have someone from the Ford family tell me when the Patricia stuff was going on, how odd it was that I was the critical one and Carlos was the one that was, you know, defending Matt Patricia. So, you know, I think look, I can't speak for Carlos. I think, you know, the vast majority of what he says, he really truly believes in. I know people out there think he's just doing it for kicks or clicks, but, you know, that's not the case. I think, you know, we all take you know, we all apply a wary eye to things just as sort of our nature. And some of us are maybe a little more patient than others, or think there's, you know, a little more room for, I don't know, leeway when it comes to some, you know, success, I guess, than others. And so it's worked, you know, I guess, for Carlos and I, even though I know he riles up a whole lot of fans, probably riles me up occasionally too. But no, Carlos and I are friends.
I think he's one of life's contrarians, and I think you know, like your relationship, like, you know, you come across as what, you know, whatever the opinion, I think the passion that both of you clearly have for the team, like, really jumps out for us, you know, maybe with a slightly different view across the pond.
Yeah, no, it's funny. I just try to play it fair, right? Like, I mean, there are obviously extenuating circumstances when it comes to anything and everything. And so you have to take some of those into account. And that doesn't mean that, you know, a situation is great or a coach or whoever it is should not get fired or should not be under the gun to produce. But, you know, look, these are all, men that are trying to do their best. And I think that's easily forgotten too. When a result doesn't go a fan base's way on Sunday, it's easy to yell and scream and want that guy's head, whether it's a player or coach. But, I can assure you that everyone out there is trying to do their best to win for Detroit.
Obviously, you mentioned, since you come up from college, the Lions are the one team that you've always sort of covered. But I guess, during your career, or even now, maybe, is there a franchise, a team that you would have enjoyed reporting on? Whether it was the style of football they played, the players they had. Is there anywhere that you would like to have reported on other than the Lions?
Just a winner, I guess. I mean, that's I've covered a winner. It doesn't matter who it is. I would like to, I've covered Super Bowls, like I said, 6 or 7 or 8 or however many of them, but I've never covered the home team, in a Super Bowl. And so, to get to experience that and have that sort of magical season, that would certainly be something that would be unique and different. And I'll tell you what, in college, I covered Michigan State basketball. So I certainly had experienced them going to the Final Four and seeing some good things there. And, I sort of parachuted in as the backup when the Pistons won the world championship and the Tigers went to the World Series. So, I've seen some good things, but for my beat itself, like I said, I've covered a lot of bad football, Michigan State under John L. Smith and Michigan under Rich Rod and the Lions for, the better first. In fact, my first Lions season really was 2008. My first full season, I was at the Oakland Press. So I did the winless season of 2008. So maybe it's me, maybe it's not the teams that I cover.
Okay, let's talk a bit more about the Lions now. And you mentioned Patricia and the whole Quintricia era. Obviously, they had many problems, and there's probably too many to kind of go into now. But if you could maybe boil it down into a couple of things, what do you think is where it all really went wrong? Because it never really seemed to ever particularly go right, apart from an isolated point here and there in time.
Well, I mean, I don't think you can discount the talent. I look at the roster, and there hasn't always been that elite player. To me, you need elite players or elite units to win in the NFL. And I do think the Lions lack that. But more than that, I mean, look, Matt Patricia was a disaster in Detroit. That's really the only way to put it. I mean, he came in and really from jump, like there just wasn't much buy-in. And, I've said this before. I don't know. I mean, everyone remembers, right, the South Padre incident that he had, that, the news on that broke 3 months after he was hired. And I don't know if that ever really gave him a chance just because of what, the fallout from that. I mean, obviously there was a lot of negative reaction, understandably, in the fan base. That really, in my eyes, started his sort of battle with the media where he didn't trust anyone. And I don't know that it completely seeped into the locker room, but I think it affected him so much as a person that it's hard to separate, how he was that first year from that incident. And so I think that just, there was so much negativity after that. Players didn't like him in the locker room. I mean, a large, portion of them, that's been well documented. Darius Slake, Andre Diggs, a lot of those guys. And so without that buy-in and without the elite players that could just do a lot of things by themselves, win games by themselves, I think that's why, the last 3 years were as bad as they were.
Just to quickly add on to that, was he the most difficult of the head coaches to talk to during your time with the Lions then? You said it was difficult with him or with
Well,
Patricia?
I think, look, all these coaches, they all have their own idiosyncrasies, and it doesn't, look, I cover them regardless, and I'm going to write what I write regardless. And so it doesn't matter to me if how the coach acts or behaves, to the media by and large. I do think, from his standpoint, he didn't trust anyone in the media here in Detroit, and that, that showed. And anytime there was anything negative written, it ate him up, and he was way too consumed by some of that stuff. And so I think that, really helped, grease the skids, as much as it wasn't us hating him or anything like that, because again, I'll cover whoever's there. I think it was the other way around, that he just didn't trust anyone, didn't trust the situation, got angry about every little thing that was written. And I think that, ultimately probably consumed him a little too much.
And obviously covering the Lions for quite a long time, and there's been quite a few different regimes, coaching regimes, and front office. Kind of over here, it feels different to us. It feels different this time around. But do you always kind of get that sort of like new coach, new coaching team bounce, or do you think this
Yeah.
really does feel like different with the kind of Brad Holmes, Dan Campbell kind of style?
No, I think both, because I think you're right. And maybe people discount that a little bit too much, right? New coach comes in, he's different from the old coach. It's a new regime, it's a new era. There's hope, right? I mean, you got rid of something because it was so bad, and now you're bringing in something new because you need a change of direction. And so there is that sort of natural bounce, natural inclination for everyone to be like, wow, look at how different this is. It's so positive now. Things are going to go right. And so you really need to see it on the field before you can say that. But, I do like the early returns on Brad Holmes and Dan Campbell. I think the Lions have hired a couple good people, smart people, people who seem to have the respect of a lot of people in the organization and in the league. Now it's just up to those people to get the right people in place, whether it's about quarterback or other people on the roster or other people in the organization that they bring in.
So is Dan Campbell as fun to talk to in real life as he comes across in his interviews? Because we eat him up over here. We absolutely love him to bits. But is he as fun to just chat to away from the camera?
He's been great so far. I'm with you. I think, nationally, the national media has, I think maybe they didn't quite understand Detroit as much. And maybe some of it is just Detroit defending its guy. But I like Dan. I like the honesty. I like the personality. I think that can take you a long way. And so I think early returns are good.
Obviously, he's a new guy in there now, but one guy who has left, who we're all sad about over this offseason, obviously Matthew Stafford. How will Alan Park feel without him? Obviously we know about him on the field, his contributions there, but what are we going to miss about him at Alan Park, and what are you as like the press going to miss about him?
I think it's just until you have a replacement, right? And then whether it's Jared Goff or whether it's, a rookie, then you move on. I do think, look, if they go 5-12 this year and, Stafford has the Rams win 12 games, then people are going to be like, oh, look at him. Look how good he is. Why couldn't this have happened here? You'll rehash that a lot, but it's just until the next guy comes in. As for what we'll miss personally, Matthew was a very private guy. I don't know that he had extremely close relationships with anyone in the media. Mitch Albom and Hank Winchester would be the two, that I think he knew a little bit better than everyone else. But I will say this, Matt was always a good guy in the locker room. I mean, you could go up to him at the locker and BS with him. He never, I think he represented the city well. He never did anything that, put him in the headlines for a negative reason. And so, that's underappreciated. And so I think Matthew was a good quarterback here in Detroit, but I do think it was time to move on.
So we've had OTAs already, and obviously you alluded to the fact that camp's going to be in a few weeks. Have you had any major takeaways from OTAs that perhaps you think have gone underreported, or is there anything that you were particularly surprised by that you weren't expecting to see that has happened, or you're expecting to happen?
Nothing I guess that was unexpected. I mean, we didn't, obviously it's OTAs, so you don't get to see people in pads. So who knows about the lines, but that's the one to me, I've said this before. I think the most important thing this year is the building blocks that are going to be a part of this thing going forward, that they continue to progress, that they live up to the expectations, right? That's the offensive line. Maybe that's Jeff Okudah. If he takes a step forward, you can feel positive about that. So those are the things that are more important to me than wins and losses. The first thing that comes to mind when you say watching the offseason and impressions, I think TJ Hawkinson's going to have a really good year. If you guys are playing fantasy football, I'd buy some shares in him, because I think he's going to be the number one target. As long as he stays healthy, he's going to put up some big numbers. I'm a little skeptical of the offense. I mean, you need to prove it to me before I'm a buyer on what they can do. And they don't, have some of that blue chip talent on defense. So that's why I think ultimately the Lions are a 5 or 6 win team.
And do you see any surprises on the roster happening between now and sort of first kickoff, given like sort of what talent we've got at the moment and where there's still maybe some holes? Do you see anything happening, or any major additions coming in?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, Todd Gurley's the name everybody will keep an eye on. And honestly, I don't know where talks stand with that. Just being on vacation, I've sort of, decompressed here a little bit. He would be the one that the Lions are, keeping tabs on, would like to bring in to maybe supplement that backfield. Even if they do, I don't think he plays a huge role. But I understand why they would bring him in. I'd keep an eye on Terrell Crosby too. That look, if there's a team out there that has an injury in training camp and loses an offensive tackle, the Lions would be willing to deal Crosby for the right price, but know that they also value him very much as a sixth lineman because of his versatility and what he means to the most important position group on this team. So they won't be giving him away, but there could be an opportunity to make a deal there.
So we've got Tyrell Crosby's biggest fan in Ant, so he's going to be happy that they value him highly. I know that.
Yeah, another good guy too. I mean, look, I people often ask, right, what are these guys like? What's the locker room like? I'll say this: the Lions, whether it's been under Schwartz or Caldwell or Patricia or now under Dan Campbell, I think the locker room has been filled with a lot of good people for the most part.
Obviously, you say it's a rebuilding year. We're just looking for a few players maybe to come through, get the building blocks in there. But is there a part of the roster that you're genuinely excited about seeing this year? Any positional groups, players, and why would that be? If so,
yeah, I mean, it's probably the chalk answer, but just the offensive line. I mean, they do have a lot of talent on that offensive line, and like I said, to me, when you look a year or two down the road, that offensive line really should be intact going forward, and so I want to see that unit lives up to its billing. That Sewell is as good as advertised. That he continues to grow. That Taylor Decker builds off what he did last year. I don't have any doubts about Frank Ragnow being an all-pro type center. So if that unit is as good as it's cracked up to be, then I think the Lions are in good shape. Not in 2021, but in the near future.
Fingers crossed on that. Right, we've got. Sorry, Steve.
No, that's
yeah. Yeah, okay. Just a few questions from listeners, if you've got time.
Sure.
And all right. So Ian Carr asks, given that American sport is designed for parity with the draft system, why do you think it is that the Lions haven't managed to get over the line in like the last 30 years or so, but teams like the Pats, the Steelers, the Packers have had fairly consistent success over that period?
$1 million question. I mean, look, you can't, I mean, obviously, everyone points to ownership, and I think the Fords they've given, the organization, for the most part, everything it needs. I mean, in terms of money or spending or some of those things, but, that doesn't absolve them of any blame in this. I think their biggest failing has been that they've been loyal to the wrong people for too long. You don't have to, it's pretty easy to see when you go back and Matt Millen and, Wayne Fonts or, some of the people that have been a part of this organization for long stretches of time. Really, look, this is an underrated thing, but I think people discount it, and it's the truth. I mean, the Green Bay Packers have been a juggernaut for 30 years. You go from one first ballot Hall of Fame quarterback in Brett Favre to another in Aaron Rodgers, and that doesn't guarantee you're going to win it every year, but you're going to be a very good team every year. And the flip side of that is the Lions have struggled at that position. I mean, Matthew Stafford is a good quarterback, but he's not on Aaron Rodgers or Brett Favre's level. And so that's the most important position in football. That's a position that, the Lions need to get right if they're going to win. And I do think there's an opportunity here in the NFC North in the coming years because of what's going on with Aaron Rodgers in Green Bay.
Just to quickly go back, you mentioned about the Ford family there. Obviously, there's a new one in now, Sheila Ford Hemp.
Yep.
A lot of people with, new starts here. I mean, over here, we think, she's done a pretty good job so far and maybe is doing things a bit differently than her predecessors. Do you get that feeling as well? Is she the real deal at the top? Is, she's sort of listening, trying to fix these problems that have plagued us for years?
Yeah, look, I can't pretend to know her real well. I mean, my very first interaction with her extended wise was when the Lions announced they were bringing Matt Patricia back at the end of the 2019 season. We talked to her, the beat writers talked to her and her mom for about 30-40 minutes. And I came out of that, I think I wrote it or put it on Twitter with a very favorable impression just of the way she carried herself, kind of knew what she wanted, knew where the organization was headed. She's learning on the job and that's fine. Look, again, you can't separate the Ford family from this, but I give Bill Ford credit, right? When he was trying to think outside the box, when nothing was working, and he went out and hired Matt Millen, and then it didn't work, and he wanted to get rid of Matt Millen early, and his dad didn't. And so there's been a lot of different dynamics there that have contributed to this. But yes, early impressions on Sheila Ford Hamp are positive, just like they are for Dan Campbell and Brad Holmes.
We've just talking about the quarterback position. And this has been probably like one of the most contentious arguments amongst the fan base over here in the UK, is all about Jared Goff. And, you know, are we going to see Jared Goff posting 2017, 2018 numbers, or, you know, how he struggled under with the Rams scheme in the last couple of years? So Phil on our WhatsApp group has asked, how many games do you think Goff will get to prove himself? And, you know, I mean, how many do you think is a reasonable number for this guy that's already got like 4 seasons under his belt?
I think it's this year. I mean, I think this is the prove it year for him. I know what they did with the contract, but, you know, look, if the Lions aren't very good, they're going to be in a position with all their extra draft capital and where they pick in the draft that they should be able to get a replacement for Jared Goff. And, you know, if they're good, then all of a sudden you're like, wow, we got a 26-year-old quarterback who played in the Super Bowl. So maybe that's not our biggest position of need. But honestly, I think the organization, you know, I've asked Brad Holmes about this multiple times, and he's never said, yes, we're married to Jared Goff. You know, in fact, he told me that they were willing to draft a quarterback in round 1 at pick number 7, had the right quarterback been there. So I think they are realistic about the position too, that, hey, this is a prove it year for Jared Goff. Jared Goff is better than a lot of NFL quarterbacks, but, you know, he's probably a middle of the pack quarterback. And if you want to have success in the NFL, do you need something greater than that? That's the question that the Lions have to answer going forward.
Just to follow up on that, because of the wide receiver core is, I think, fairly reasonably looked at as not the best that Detroit have ever had, to put it mildly. If I know it's a kind of chicken or egg situation, but if the wide receiver core doesn't perform, do you think we learn anything particularly about Goff, or is it just if the quarterback and wide receivers don't perform as a unit, then that kind of is just going to reflect on Goff because he's going to run out of time anyway?
Yeah, honestly, no, that's something that I've sort of pointed out, you know, throughout this offseason too, is that if you want to get a real evaluation on Jared Goff, don't you have to get him a number 1 weapon, you know, and maybe, you know, that was part of the reasoning, a small part, but part of the reasoning why I thought, you know, they would have been wise to keep Kenny Golladay. And you look at what they have in that receiving core right now, and it's not much, frankly. I mean, I think Tyrell Williams will have a decent season. And I mentioned Hawkinson, obviously, he's a tight end. Amon-Ra St. Brown, I'm high on him, but he's also a rookie, and rookie receivers are prone to, you know, have some struggles. So ultimately, at the end of the day, I've said this about Jared Goff before too. If your team goes, you know, wins 5 or 6 games, are you going to come out of that season saying, yeah, that's my quarterback? Like I'm wholly, you know, buying into that guy. I just don't know that a lot of people in the NFL would say that. So I think for Jared Goff to be the guy in Detroit, I think the Lions need to win a lot of games. And I don't see that happening. And that's not Goff's fault. That's just sort of the hand that he's been dealt.
Kind of feels inevitable almost a little bit for at the moment. It can all change.
It does, absolutely. And again, look, I think Goff's better than a lot of quarterbacks, and maybe doesn't get the due that he deserves. And I know the Lions are very pleased with the way that he's been this offseason, how he's, you know, talked to these receivers and been a leader for them, and the things that he's done to, you know, be a part of building this playbook. You know, I guess we'll see if it's enough here in the coming months.
Just to sort of finish this off from our listeners, going back to Calvin Johnson, and obviously you've done the Hall of Fame bid for him. Given you were one of the main sort of guys behind that, Josh asked, he says he'd love to hear your opinions on the situation between Megatron and the Lions. Is he coming home? Is he not? It seems to change quite frequently. Is there anything you know, or you've heard, or your own personal opinion about what's going on with them?
Yeah, I probably know a little too much on this that I, you know, haven't been able to report quite yet. So I'm not going to be able to share too many details with you. I'll tell you this. I think it's going to happen at some point. You know, I don't know it, but the bottom line is it's going to be all about money, and the Lions are willing to pay him some money, and it's just, you know, not enough money right now. And there's things that they need to work out. But ultimately, I think, you know, it's too important for the Lions to have him be a part of the organization. I will say that it does seem like there's been a little bit of thawing in the relationship. So they're not, you know, this thing is not getting done tomorrow by any means, but I still do see there being an avenue to getting this thing repaired.
All right. Anything more, boys, that you want to ask before we finish?
No, I mean, I think we've got a kind of cautious positivity. I think we know that Brad Holmes comes across as a super smart guy, and he's obviously seen something in Jared Goff in his 4 years at the Rams, and so I think that probably gives us a bit of hope that it's not going to be another 4-13 season, and that we're not going to be picking top 5 or 6. But at the same time, I think it's good that we've got someone that's got a plan. And does it come across to you that this is a genuine 3-4 year plan? Because the problem is with 3-4 year plans is you have a bad year one and the other years go out the window. Do you really feel there's some longevity in this kind of like regime?
Yeah, no, I think you said it well. I mean, look, to me, the Lions are not, they're a much better team than the Houston Texans, right? And they're probably better than the Jets and the Jaguars and some of those teams. So everyone that's calling them the worst team in the NFL, I don't subscribe to that. I don't think they're great by any means. Again, 5 or 6 wins is not, that's not going to, give anyone any sort of longevity. But I do think we've seen the ship is pointed in the right direction. And I think, you should be able to, even in losses, you should be able to see some incremental gains for the franchise. And so I think there's reason for hope. And the biggest thing that this organization still needs to do, in my eyes, is get the quarterback position right. And if that turns out to be Jared Goff, then they're well ahead of where I think they are. If it's not, then they have the ammo the next 2 years to go get the guy that they need to be successful.
Yeah.
Well, fingers crossed on the positive side of that. Thank you so much for your time, Dave. We really, really appreciate you coming on to our small little thing here and talking with us. Is there anything you want to add just before we finish?
No, I apologize. We're doing this a little bit late. I know the listeners probably don't know that, but I appreciate you guys dealing with me for my forgetfulness and any background noise as I'm out here at by the lake a little bit. But happy to do it, and hope you guys enjoy the season.
Yeah, I hope
Thanks,
so
Dave.
too. Thank you
Thanks
so
ever
much.
so much.
We'll speak to you soon, I hope. Cheers, Dave.
All right, you got it, guys. We'll see you.
Take care.
Cheers.